Muy buenas tardes, good afternoon, welcome, bienvenidos, bienvenidas al Centro de Estudio Puertorriqueño, the Center for Puerto Rican Studies, que cumplimos el mes pasado 52 años aquí en Nueva York. We have this intimate gathering today to welcome everyone to Cumbre Afro, which will be in full force tomorrow here at Centro. Estamos en esta cena juntos hoy entre nosotros familiares, de comunidad, colegas, amigas, amigos, amigas, para celebrar la apertura del centro, el Cumbre Afro aquí en el centro por primera vez. Acabamos de llegar ayer de Puerto Rico de la UPR, de la Cumbre Afro allá, y les quiero dar las gracias el programa PR Afro, a Mayra Santos Febres, que está aquí. A todo mi equipo del centro que se ha fajado en montar esta cumbre en Nueva York, que no es fácil, y también al Centro Schomburg, quien nos llevó hoy en un tour del Schomburg. So I want to thank everyone, the Center for Puerto Rican Studies, all of my staff who made this possible. We've been working tirelessly, from the tote bag design to the run-up show to the invitations to flying people from Puerto Rico here to enjoy this cumbre. This is our first gathering for the kickoff tomorrow. We want to thank the Schomburg Center also for hosting us today. The invited folks from Puerto Rico went and took a walking tour of Harlem, and then took a very in-depth tour of the Schomburg Center before coming here to learn about the Central Archives and Library, as well as our gallery exhibition. There's so much vision and labor that it takes to make this happen. And it's in no small part to the woman standing next to me, Dr. Mayra Santos Febres, what I like to call one of Puerto Rico's most important living artists. So we have a full day of events tomorrow lined up with incredible panelists, many of whom are here today, and we can't wait to hear you tomorrow. Estamos súper emocionados para el día de mañana con todos los panelistas, muchos de los cuales están aquí hoy. Muchas gracias por venir, por estar con nosotros y por compartir su conocimiento con nosotros. Antes de leerle lo que he preparado para hoy, le quiero dar el momento a Mayra Santos a darle la bienvenida, que ella es la visionaria que pensó en lo que es la Cumbre Afro, después de tantos años de llevar a cabo lo que era este festival literario, Festival de la Palabra, que era una cosa también súper grande e importante. So, Mayra, por favor.
Sí, gracias. Buenas noches a todos, a todas, a todes. Fíjate, I think I'm going to go and switch to English. I like doing that. So I think that one of the things that I'm going to do today is to switch to English, because I'm really grateful to be able to do la cumbre here. De verdad, bien agradecida. Yomaira y yo somos comadres. And as you know, in Puerto Rico, being a comadre is a very serious business, It has to do with establishing a lineage that is energetic and spiritual and familiar. And people sometimes they don't take it seriously because they privilege the blood, the biology, the material aspect of family. Pero nosotros sabemos que las familias se constituyen de otra manera. So when we decided that we were going to do la cumbre here as well, we did it out of comadrazgo. We wanted to create a connection between, dentro y para la familia puertorriqueña que resiste y recuerda y se conecta a una identidad puertorriqueña, a una identidad latina, a una identidad diaspórica, no matter where we are family. And so that's what we wanted to do with la cumbre. So la cumbre is nobody's, ¿cómo se dice? Property. Nosotros no creemos en esa manera de decir mío, ¿no? Cuando decimos mío es como decimos mi hijo, mi comadre, mi hermana, mi primo. Ese mío no es de propiedad, es de pertenencia, which is, property and being from is two different things. Así que ese es el mambo y ese es el espíritu de la cumbre. And also I just want to tell you very briefly the history of la cumbre. La Cumbre was born because we wanted to do an event, a gathering event that was the privileged knowledge, que ayuda al privilegio del desarrollo de nuestros saberes, but that is not purely academic. Primero porque eso es bien aburrido. Bien aburrido. You know, when you sit down and you have experts on this and experts on that, tú te quieres pegar 3 tiros. Dices, carajo, pero I'd rather read you. Tú sabes, yo sé leer, no me tienes que venir a leer lo que escribiste al frente mío. How about sharing a dialogue? How about hacer algo que siempre se nos queda corto, que es cuando finalmente estamos juntos de este desparrame al cual nos lleva la desposesión, expropriation, forced migration, poverty. How about when we finally are together? How about talking? How about a dialogue? Entonces la cumbre está basada en el diálogo, no expertos boricuas y expertos colombianos y expertos afro hay que ni votándolo se acaban porque we have overcompensated poverty through doctorate degrees, ¿sabes? Teníamos que asegurarnos que nos iban a dejar entrar, así que pues sacamos los papeles, sacamos las licencias de aprendizaje, la de conducir, you know, we're really good at having our papers in order or faking them if we need to. Pero, tú sabes, lo hicimos. We have been experts all the time, pero necesitábamos que la manera en que pudiésemos hablar no fuera eurocentrada, supremacista, hierarchical, I am this and that. Who are you? Mira, yo soy la mamá, yo soy la hija de Mariana y Juan. Instead of, oh, yo soy graduada de no sé qué, Cornell, y ganadora de tantos premios. ¿Y qué importa? ¿Qué importa eso? No tiene ninguna importancia. Para nosotros no. So, when Yomaira told me, Mayra, vamos a hacer la cumbre en Nueva York. I said, yes. We didn't know how we were going to do it. Así que yo lo que hice fue que le dije, mira, lo que vamos a hacer es que tú consigues chavos de la melón por acá y yo consigo de la melón para acá y después buscamos una gente y le escondemos los chavos por aquí y por allá y entonces hacemos la cumbre. And it worked. It worked. Así que gracias. Because I don't know how I was envisioning this room. And that was what gave us, lo que nos dio la fuerza para poder hacer todo lo que tuvimos que hacer por año y medio para poder estar en estas mesas de diálogo. So thank you so much for being here. Thank you, thank you. Ustedes, familia, nos sostuvieron con su espíritu, con su fuerza, para que pudiéramos estar aquí. HH, gracias.
Entonces, para abrir la cumbre, es que como que I feel like I'm talking to myself because I can't hear myself. Para empezar la cumbre, yo le preparé algo para recordar este momento, algo en el cual estoy pensando. Soy director del centro ya hace 1 año y medio. I've been director of the center for just a year and a half. But I really wanted to kind of prepare and think about what I wanted to say to open this cumbre, a cumbre that will hopefully happen again here in a few years. But I was thinking about this book, the latest collection, a bilingual edition that Centro Press just published of Ángela María Dávila's Animal Fiero y Tierno, Fierce and Tender Animal. And I have been thinking and writing about this poem around memory. So I'll read you a few lines in Spanish, a few lines in the translated English, and then I'll read to you both in English and in Spanish what I prepared. I hope not to take too long because I can't wait to introduce Vanessa Valdés. So Ángela María escribe, con el recuerdo al hombro, pero fíjense, que muchas trampas hondas nos detienen y cómo con lo hondo nos movemos y nos vemos aquí. Those are just the first 4 lines. Memory is slung over my shoulder, but hey, isn't it something? How many deep snares stop us, and how with the deep we move, and we find each other here. I'm thinking about us finding each other here. I'm consumed by the archive, My preoccupation is not with the mere idea of the archive or the heated debates around archival processing or theory. Instead, I am reckoning with the archive of Black memory, with the fact of Black survival, and with the growing forms of accounting, mending, and suturing our often fractured histories as individuals and as a collective. More specifically, in the last 20 years, I have spent a considerable amount of time thinking about Black Boricuas, a people at the crossroads of history itself. Famously lauded as the first Puerto Ricans by noted writer and translator José Luis González, who declared in his foundational collection El País de Cuatro Pisos that Black people were the most bound to the newly and violently created colony of Puerto Rico. Enslaved Africans were not indigenous to Borican, like the misnamed and dispossessed Taínos, nor were they European settlers who could easily and often did return home to Europe and points beyond. Instead, the enslaved Africans who were trafficked and forcibly brought to the archipelago as chattel were to be the first to adopt and create a new home in what was to become Puerto Rico, and often commingled and co-created new communities with the indigenous peoples of Borican. Put another way, indigenous Africans in their own right, they were compelled to make a home on the lands of other dispossessed indigenous peoples in the face of brutalizing colonial, racial, and gendered violence by settlers of varying social classes. For these peoples and their Afro-Indigenous descendants, destierro became a constitutive part of their existence and a cornerstone for the nation that emerged in the wake of these violent encounters. At the time, Gonzalez's provocations were an insult to the Puerto Rican bourgeoisie intelligentsia. Not only did his historical analysis question their hold on the social and political interpretation of Puerto Rican past and future, but he also sought to empower a people that simply did not exist in the enduring fantasies of Puerto Rican racial democracy. The predominant Spanish colonial nation building project of mestizaje, boasted by anti-Blackness and anti-indigeneity, was thought to be an alchemy of equality meant to move Black and indigenous peoples slowly towards whiteness through racial mixing. This racial project endured beyond the tenure of Spanish colonial rule and remains ever present as the preeminent racial ideology throughout Latin America and parts of the Caribbean. The persistent logic of mestizaje in Puerto Rico reasons that all Puerto Ricans are racially mixed and that our roots are bound up together as descendants of Spanish, Taíno, and African ancestry in that order. And following this logic, there is no race, and ipso facto, no racism. This logic is a snare, as Angela Maria Davila reminds us. While the lived experiences of Black Boricuas, political and socioeconomic structures, and colloquial language itself undercut this partial racial utopia, the permanence of anti-critical race thinking creates the conditions for how Black writers, artists, thinkers, activists, and communities are treated when they demand justice and accountability for historical wrongs and contemporary forms of violence, neglect, and domination. The social contract of racial democracy decries any attempt to critically address Black Puerto Rican history or redress anti-Blackness in its pervasive harms. Puerto Rican data on race or lack thereof is a weapon of contemporary Puerto Rican racial schemas. By pointing to the lack of data around race and radicalized experiences, officials can deny the proof of anti-Blackness as endemic to social, political, economic, and effective orders in Puerto Rico. The demands brought forward by living Black peoples are but a nuisance. Amy Cesar's fly, battered away by the colonizer. It is in the face of this flagrant and ongoing dismissal that Black Puerto Rican artists create works that conjure the political and sacred landscapes of Puerto Rico's past and futures. In the words of Alfonso Arturo Schomburg, we are tasked with digging up our past and presenting it again and again to each other and the world. Taken seriously, works of written, sonic, and visual art and scholarship offer lenses through which we can consider both archipelagic and diasporic Black life, and to imagine a Borican beyond the enduring vestiges of political and spiritual colonial domination. To consider the diasporic resonance of el vaivén, our constant travel between here and Puerto Rico, our back and forth movement that's most associated with Puerto Ricans. This ability to migrate with relative ease between Puerto Rico and the US, we need to consider and remind ourselves that the double diaspora of Black Boricuas, that is, that while we are often discussed as a phenomenon of the early to mid-20th century migration, to look deeper at palimpsest of our history is also to reckon with the diaspora of Africans to the Americas through force and cooptations. Our diaspora then has a long historical arc for how we negotiate the comings and goings, further impacting how we understand ourselves in relation to everyday practices, including language, foodways, kinship practices, social and political ideologies, and cosmologies. Thus, our collage of diaspora is not just a phenomenon of physical and geographical shifting, but something much deeper. It creates and recreates methods, practices, pathways for understanding ourselves and finding each other in transit. Like the epigraph to this talk I'm giving right now, pulled from the work of the preeminent late Afro-Boricua poet Ángela María Dávila, whose memory has been upheld and continually taught before this book was published. And when it was published in 1973, it went out of print. And when I was getting doctoral students at Michigan State University come to do their PhDs with me, they would come to MSU with Xerox copies of this book because they learned about it in Mayra's classes at the UPR. Ángela María Dávila is Mayra's teacher, and we see it. I lost my place because I think I had to yell about something. Okay. But as Ángela María Dávila tells us, the work of memory and livingness that are urgent and insurgent must be discussed, must be talked about, must be written. Poetry, like visual art, offers us an aesthetic form which is rooted in a succinct economy. Dávila's poem speaks of the memory we carry, our bodies laden with the weight of them as we traverse lo hondo, the deep snares, ever moving forward. Y nos vemos aquí, she writes, and we find each other here, emphasizing the collectivity of the journey of undertaking both memory work and eluding the traps that ensnare us into docility, disaffection, or death. My work as a scholar and activist have been aimed at critically linking Black diasporic thinking, writing, and arts. From the Caribbean to Africa, from the US to Europe and Latin America to Oceania, I am honored now in this moment to be able to pay sustained attention to Puerto Rico, my homeland, and to think of the Puerto Rican experience, in the words of Mayra Santos Febres, as an important space. Puerto Rico es chiquito, dijo Mayra en el Festival de la Palabra de 2016, pero el mundo cabe en él. Puerto Rico es chiquito, pero el mundo cabe en él. Puerto Rico is small, but the world fits inside of it. The works of Afro-diasporic artists, thinkers, and organizers are likewise pedagogical, teaching us about race, gender, sex, power, and reminds us, in the words of Afro-Caribbean feminist elder M. Jackie Alexander, that we must cultivate a way of knowing in which we direct our social, cultural, psychic, and spiritually marked attention on each other. This imperative is not a simple acknowledgement of the other, but rather a call to mark our attention with an ethics and intention to cultivation. To do so is an act of relationality. That is building ethical ways to engage in each other's histories and lived experiences and hopes for futurities beyond enclosure across differences. Relationality is a practice that subverts the built-in hierarchy of colonial logics and instead looks to possible points of connection and accompaniment and struggle, succor and joy. And we find each other here, right? Okay. Lo voy a leer en español ahora. Gracias. Perdón, yo lo quería que sea más rápido, pero ok. Me consume el archivo. Mi preocupación no es con el concepto del archivo ni en los debates intensos en torno de su tratamiento o teoría. Más bien, perdón, quería darle las gracias a Sebastián que me lo tradujo hoy, pero bien rapidito porque lo tenía más en inglés. Y quería ir para Schomburg. Oh, llegó Joy. Ahí está, perfecto. Más bien me encuentro lidiando con el archivo de la memoria negra, con el hecho de la supervivencia negra y con las crecientes formas de contabilizar, remendar y suturar nuestras historias, a menudo fracturadas, como individuos y como colectivos. Particularmente en las últimas 2 décadas, he dedicado mucho tiempo a pensar en les negres boricua, un pueblo que se encuentra en la encrucijada de la propia historia. Famosamente elogiados como las primeras puertorriqueñas por el escritor traductor de renombre José Luis González, quien declaró en su colección fundacional El País de 4 Pisos que los pueblos negros eran los más vinculados a la nueva y violentamente creada colonia de Puerto Rico. Las africanas esclavizadas no eran indígenas de Boriken como les taínes mal nombrados y desposeídos, ni tampoco eran los colonos europeos que podían fácilmente, y a menudo lo hacían, regresar a sus hogares en Europa y puntos más allá. Por el contrario, las africanas esclavizadas que fueron traficados y traídos a la fuerza al archipiélago como propiedades fueron las primeras en verse obligadas a adoptar y criar un hogar en lo que se convertiría en Puerto Rico, y a menudo se mezclaron y co-crearon nuevas comunidades con pueblos indígenas de Boriken. En otras palabras, indígenas africanas por derecho propio se volvieron obligadas a crear un hogar en tierras de otros pueblos indígenas desposeídos frente a la brutal violencia colonial, racial y de género ejercida por los colonos de diversas clases sociales, porque eso es importante notarlo, porque no todos eran de la clase élite, también trabajadores y sin clase, ¿verdad? Para estos pueblos y sus descendientes afroindígenas, el destierro se convirtió en una parte constitutiva de su existencia y en un pilar de la nación que surgió a raíz de estos encuentros violentos. En su momento, las provocaciones de González fueron un insulto a la intelectualidad burguesa de Puerto Rico. Sus análisis históricos no solo cuestionaban su control sobre la interpretación social y política del pasado y el futuro de Puerto Rico, sino que también pretendía empoderar a un pueblo que sencillamente no existía en las fantasías perdurables de la democracia racial puertorriqueña. El proyecto colonial español predominante de construcción nacional de mestizaje, reforzado por antinegritud y anti-indigenidad, gracias, se creyó ser una alquimia de la igualdad, con la intención de mover a los pueblos negros e indígenas lentamente hacia la blancura a través de la mezcla racial. Este proyecto racial perduró más allá del dominio colonial español y sigue siendo la ideología racial preeminente en toda América Latina y parte del Caribe. La lógica persistente del mestizaje en Puerto Rico argumenta que todos los puertorriqueños somos mestices y que nuestras raíces están unidas como descendientes de españoles, taínes, africanos, pero en ese orden descendiente. Y siguiendo esta lógica, no hay raza e ipso facto no hay racismo. Esta lógica es una trampa, como nos recuerda Ángela María Dávila en su poema. Aunque las experiencias vividas por los negros boricuas, las estructuras políticas, socioeconómicas y el propio lenguaje colonial socavan esta utopía racial disparatada, la permanencia del pensamiento racial y anticrítico crea las condiciones que determinan cómo se trata a los escritores, artistas, pensadores, activistas y comunidades negras cuando exigen justicia y cuentas por los errores históricos y las formas contemporáneas de violencia, negligencia y dominación. El contrato social de la democracia racial rechaza cualquier intento de abordar de forma crítica la historia de los puertorriqueños negros o de rectificar la antinegritud y sus daños penetrantes. Los datos puertorriqueños sobre la raza o falta de ellos son una arma de los esquemas raciales puertorriqueños contemporáneos. Al señalar la falta de datos sobre la raza y las experiencias racializadas, los funcionarios pueden negar la prueba de que antinegritud es endémica en el orden social, político, económico y afectivo de Puerto Rico. Frente a ese rechazo flagrante y continuo, los artistas puertorriqueños negros crean obras que evocan los paisajes políticos y sagrados del pasado y el futuro de Puerto Rico. En las palabras de Arturo Schomburg, tenemos la tarea de desenterrar nuestro pasado y presentarlo una y otra vez a los demás y al mundo. Tomadas en serio, las obras de artes escritas, sonoras y visuales y la academia ofrecen lentes a través de cuales considerar la vida negra, archipelágica y diaspórica e imaginar un boriquen más allá de los vestigios perdurables de la dominación colonial y política espiritual. Para considerar la resonancia diaspórica del vaivén, el movimiento de ir y venir más asociado con la capacidad de los puertorriqueños para emigrar con relativa facilidad entre los Estados Unidos y Puerto Rico, debemos recordar la doble diáspora de les negres boricuas. Si bien la diáspora puertorriqueña se considera a menudo un fenómeno de principios y mediados del siglo XX, profundizar en el palimpsesto de nuestra historia también es tener en cuenta la diáspora de los africanos en las Américas y a través de la fuerza y a las Américas a través de la fuerza y la cooptación. Nuestra diáspora, por lo tanto, tiene un arco histórico larguísimo, 500 años, en cuanto a cómo negociamos las ideas y las idas y venidas, lo que influye aún más en cómo nos entendemos a nosotros mismos en relación con las prácticas cotidianas, incluyendo el lenguaje, las costumbres alimentarias, las prácticas del parentesco, las ideologías sociales, políticas y cosmológicas. Así pues, nuestro collage diaspórico, como se titula la exposición que está en la Galería del Centro, no es solo un fenómeno de desplazamiento físico y geográfico, sino algo mucho más profundo. Crea y recrea métodos, prácticas y vías para entendernos a nosotros mismos y encontrarnos en el tránsito. como el epígrafe de este ensayo extraído de la obra de la preeminente poeta afroboricua Ángela María Dávila, las obras de la memoria y la vivencia son urgentes e insurgentes. La poesía habla de la memoria que llevamos de nuestros cuerpos cargados con su peso. La poesía, al igual que el arte visual, nos ofrece una forma estética arraigada en una economía sucinta. El poema de Dávila habla de la memoria que llevamos de nuestros cuerpos cargados con su peso mientras atravesamos lo hondo y avanzando siempre hacia adelante. Y nos vemos aquí, escribe, y nos encontramos aquí, subrayando la colectividad del viaje que supone emprender el trabajo de la memoria y eludir las trampas que nos atrapan en la docilidad, el desamor y la muerte. Mi trabajo como académica activista se ha dirigido a vincular de forma crítica el pensamiento, la escritura y las artes de la diáspora negra, del Caribe a África, de Estados Unidos a Europa y de la América Latina a Oceana. Me siento honrada ahora que en este momento de mi trabajo puedo prestar una atención sostenida a Puerto Rico, mi tierra natal, y pensar en la experiencia puertorriqueña con las palabras que dijo Yomaira Santos Febres en la apertura del Festival de la Palabra en el 2016, que nunca se me olvida. Ella dijo ahí, Puerto Rico es chiquito, pero el mundo cabe en él. Las obras de artistas, pensadores, organizadores afrodiaspóricos son igualmente pedagógicas, enseñándonos sobre la raza, género, sexo y poder, y nos recuerdan, en las palabras de la sabia feminista afrocaribeña M. Jackie Alexander, que debemos de cultivar una forma de conocer en que dirigimos nuestra atención social, cultural, psíquica y espiritual marcada hacia los demás. Es imperativo, no es un simple reconocimiento del otro, sino más bien una llamada a marcar nuestra atención con una ética, con una intención de cultivo. Hacerlo es un acto de relacionalidad, es decir, construir formas éticas de participar en las historias, experiencias vividas y esperanzas de futuros de los demás, más allá del confinamiento, más allá de las diferencias. La relacionalidad es una práctica que subvierte la jerarquía incorporada de las lógicas coloniales y en su lugar busca posibilidades y puntos de conexión y acompañamiento en la lucha, el socorro y la alegría, y nos da sitios donde nos podemos ver y encontrar una y otra vez. Les quiero dar las gracias por estar aquí. Es algo muy lindo para tenerlos aquí en el Centro de Estudios Puertorriqueños en nuestros tenemos 52 años aquí. Y estoy súper feliz de poder compartir eso con ustedes, pero también compartir que tenemos con nosotros hoy no solamente a Yomaira Santos Febres, pero también a Joy Bivins, la directora del Centro de Schomburg. Y también tenemos la doctora Vanessa Valdés, que va a dar la charla magistral de hoy. Dr. Vanessa Valdés, what? Is a writer and an independent scholar whose work focuses on the literatures, visual arts, and histories of Black people throughout the Western Hemisphere. She's an engaging speaker, and she was a professor at CUNY for 17 years, from 2007 to 2024, earning the rank of full professor. She's the author and editor of 7 books, and has written she has written on the literature of Black women in the United States, Cuba, and Brazil, as well as a field-defining biography of Arturo Schomburg, the namesake of the Schomburg Center for Research in Black Culture in New York City. Additionally, she has written episodes of history on Haiti and Puerto Rico. In her most recent book, she focuses on Joaquin Maria Machado de Assis, Brazil's most widely canonized writer. From 2021 to 2023, she co-curated the Juan de Pareja Afro-Hispanic Painter, an exhibition at the Met. And she also co-authored the exhibition catalog for the Met. In addition to her long-standing relationship with the Schomburg Center, Dr. Valdés has collaborated with the Ballet Hispánico for its dance Buscando a Juan and the Lincoln Center for their Legacies of San Juan Hill series. She is the editor of the Afro-Latinx Future series at the State University of New York Press, SUNY Press, and she's also the co-editor of the Global Black Writers in Translation series at Vanderbilt University Press. And she is currently on the advisory board of the Schomburg Center Centennial Celebration, which starts this May 2025, 100 years of the Schomburg Center. 100 years. Okay, thank you. With you, Vanessa Valdés.
Yeah. Thank you, Georgina. Thank you. Good evening. First, I want to thank Dr. Yomaira-Figueroa-Vásquez and her staff here at Centro, who are amazing and wonderful and glorious. All of you. Thank you so much. Dr. Mayra Santos Febres, it is an honor to be in your presence as well, and all that you are doing, truly, and all that you are doing at UPR, and all that you're doing with the center. God bless you. God bless you both. These women are truly, honest to God, revolutionizing a whole entire field and a whole entire island and all that it's doing. I cannot emphasize enough the work that these two women are doing. So please, thank you both. Dr. Elizabeth Alexander, and of course the Andrew W. Mellon Foundation, Dr. Joy Bivins, and the community at the Schomburg Center for Research in Black Culture, everyone who came together to make this event happen, those of you who are online, those of you who are in this room, thank you for joining me this Friday evening. Apparently it's gonna be a party. I will tell you that I was scheduled to talk for 45 minutes. We are beginning this event a little bit later, so I'm gonna get through this as fast as I can, I promise you, but I'm still gonna be engaging and wonderful, so we'll do this right. So, an introduction to me. I am a child of the Bronx, New York. I am the daughter of Robert and Iris Delia Colón Valdés, who met here in El Barrio. My father was raised on 104th. My mother came from Puerto Rico to New York at 15. She lived on East 99th Street. I cannot tell you what this means to me to be in this space. So thank you. So I give both of those people all the credit because the way that they raised us, we had no limitations. I did not know what it meant, quote unquote, to be Puerto Rican. That I found out in college when people said, oh, you're from the Bronx? Did you have a bullet point vest? Did you carry, how'd you get to school? What did you do? So that was those who weren't Puerto Rican. The Puerto Ricans said, the Puerto Ricans from the islands said, oh no, we're not the same. You all who from New York, I don't even know why you call yourself Puerto Ricans. We don't know, y'all don't know our language, y'all don't know our history, y'all don't know our holidays. Okay, within the New Yorkers, well, you're too dark to be this. Because this is what true Puerto Ricans is. So I've labeled this as the auto-disciplining of the young. Not Puerto Rican enough, too Puerto Rican. Too Puerto Rican was actually never said. Just like too black is never said. Not enough, right? Which is what we continue to do to each other, right? Oh, I don't know this person. They're not enough, quote unquote. The role of language. I write this here because Blackness rarely came up in my Puerto Rican family, even though we are a Black Puerto Rican family. But, somos puertorriqueños. Punto y ya. Right? That was it. I asked my grandmother once, I remember asking, I said, well, you had a white Puerto Rican, but white father and Black mother. How did that feel? And she was like, what do you mean? We're all Puerto Rican. Period. These are the children of la gran familia puertorriqueña, right? Somos puertorriqueños, ya, right? It's not so different than many places, actually, not only even in Latin America, right? France, the same thing. We're all French. There's no race here. Let's ask the Algerians. Let's ask the Senegalese, if we're all French. So, the role of language, when I was in college, another thing that college taught me was when people spoke about the African diaspora, they always left out the Spanish-speaking countries. It never included anything, but not even just Puerto Rico, Cuba, Ecuador, Mexico, no importa. Blackness also, right? So I graduated now, I think, 25 years ago? So this is, this is changing. But I made a vow that definitely, my first vow was that African diaspora phrase would include Spanish-speaking countries, right? My second vow, the other thing I found was I went to a Caribbean event, and Caribbean did not include Spanish-speaking countries, which was interesting, right? In the same way that when we hear about the West Indian Parade in Brooklyn, right? Like, who's included and who's not? Who gets left out? Who gets, like, what's all of these things that we're always talking about? So my vow was to create a space that would include all of these things. So if you see the first two books I have, Let Spirit Speak and The Future Is Now. Let Spirit Speak was a conference that I organized. This year marks 15 years ago. The Future Is Now were essays from that conference. I have one of the conference members in this audience, right? But you see, deliberately, that is Cultural Journeys to the African Diaspora, a new look at African diaspora studies. Anybody who looked in those books would find all Blackness in the Americas. Colombia, Mexico, Trinidad and Tobago, Jamaica, Haiti, Puerto Rico, everybody. That's what we do. Oshun's Daughters was next. Diasporic Blackness, that's the Mr. Schomburg book. Racialized Visions, Haiti and the Hispanic Caribbean, which came because Arturo Schomburg, at his death, one of his best friends, Dantes Bellegarde, who was a Haitian diplomat, said that Arturo Schomburg was the person who knew the most about Haiti and yet who was not Haitian. And when I wrote about Haiti in Diasporic Blackness, in that manuscript, one of the readers, when we write these books, we send them off to readers. And one of the readers said, "We don't understand this Haiti part. You're confusing things. This doesn't fit." So that became my next book. There's Juan de Pareja, and there's Machado de Assis, Blackness in the Americas. Juan de Pareja lived in the 17th century of Spain. Machado de Assis, the most canonized writer in Brazil, ahead of his time. Most Brazilians, literally hundreds of millions of Brazilians, since the 19th century, late 19th century, he lived into the 20th century, did not know he was Black. In his time, when they buried him, somebody mentioned in his obituary that he was mulatto. And one of his colleagues said, "That is an insult. How dare you? Why would you mention that?" So thinking about Blackness in our spaces and the histories. In looking at these covers, what do you see, right? And this isn't like a tricky thing. I'm not trying to, but it is truly, as an editor, I've received proposals about Blackness that when they do the literary review, all the titles have to include Afro-Latinidad. And my point is, none of my books include that name. And yet there's all Blackness. That's all Black Latin America right there. Delve deeper. Questions of language. Arturo Alfonso Schomburg, when people ask me, why did you write on him? I remember being in college and learning about this man, this Puerto Rican man, who had a library named after him. And I, as a child of New York City, did not know about him. So at 19 years old, I did what a 19-year-old does, which is just be indignant and decide like, oh, if ever, right? So when I began my research more than a decade ago now in 2013, what I found was Arthur Schomburg, archivist of the Harlem Renaissance. The Negro digs up his past. He focused on African-American history, as does the center named after him, period. These are the impressions about him, right? Just focusing on his years, 1874 to 1938, what stands out, focusing on the dates solely, because people don't focus, when they're doing work sometimes, they kind of skip things, focusing on the dates. What events happened? The end of slavery in Puerto Rico, 1873. He's born a year later, which means that's very present in his mind, right? The Spanish-American War happens in 1898. World War I has happened. U.S. citizenship to Puerto Rico has happened. The Harlem Renaissance and the Great Depression. He lives through all of this, right? So that kind of starts giving me senses of like, who is this man? In addition to the dates, here are a few things also that stood out when I started reading the work that was on him. His age When the Negro Digs Up His Past was published. This is the one essay that most people know about. If you know about him, you read his essay. That essay was published in 1925. He was born in 1874. He was 51 years old, which means what was the first 50 years of his life? That was my question, right? His name also called out to me. His birthplace called out to me. The names of his children, all of this, right? Because the impressions were, right? And here's, I forgot to say this. There are 4 movements. I'm already on 3. We're going to move through this, Papa. So, his name, his birthplace, the names of his children, the subjects of his writings. Why did this reach out? Why did this call out to me? His name as it appears in public writing. Where's the Arthur to the Arturo? What is this? On his baptismal certificate, he is Arturo Alfonso Schomburg. His baptismal certificate is at the Schomburg Center. In public writings, in his earliest public writings, beginning with letters to the editor of the New York Times, he starts signing Arthur A. It's also AA, right? By the end of his life in 1935, he doesn't know it's the end of his life, but in 1935, he starts signing Arturo again, right? So it's not that anything left. Interesting things. His birthplace. San Mateo de Cangrejos, Puerto Rico. Founded on November 20th, 1773, it is recognized as the only municipality founded by free blacks in Puerto Rico. Today recognized as Santurce, Puerto Rico. Right? Deeply important. Deeply, deeply important because, again, one goes, oh, if his birth was incidental. No, he was born in a specific place. He was born to Mary Joseph. Mary Joseph was a woman from St. Croix. St. Croix at the time, neighboring island, of course. St. Croix was part of the Danish West Indies. We are talking about empires here. Spain, of course, this was a Spanish colony when he was born still. The Danish colony is next door, right? The Danish West Indies. San Mateo de Cangrejos was founded by people fleeing other empires because the Spanish Empire promised them all they had to do was be baptized and they'd be free. Loyalty to the crown, baptized, free. That's what Spain did for a period of time. The names of his children. Again, thinking of like Arthur Schomburg, who only focused on U.S. history, U.S. Black history. Maximo Arthur Jr., Kingsley Guadionex, Reginald Stanfield, Nathaniel Jose, Fernando Dolores, y Carlos Plácido. So this is very, very early in my research, right? Where I'm coming with the impressions of he has forgotten Puerto Rico, right? Because blackness, the perception is blackness trumps nationalism. And the United States is the only place that has Black people. So if he was focusing on Black people, he therefore only focused on the United States. It takes very little to uncover. There was no digging. I promise there was no digging. It was very little. It was scratching the surface. It was going like, shh. It was moving the dust and going, what are you talking about? This is all here. Examples of the subjects of his writings. The Schomburg Center for Research in Black Culture has a bibliography of all of his writings. These are only a few. Haiti. Plácido was a Cuban poet, right? 19th century Cuban poet who died in 1844. The fight for liberty in St. Lucia. General Evaristo Esteños, killed in Cuba, Afro-Cuban, who founded a party of Black Cubans that were killed by the Cuban state in 1912. Racial Integrity, a plea for the establishment of a chair of Negro history. He wrote that pamphlet in 1913. Black Studies is founded at San Francisco State in 1968. He is writing 55 years before that. Juan Latino, Spanish, he's from Granada, professor of Latin in Granada. right? 16th century writer. And appreciation is about Phyllis Wheatley. Sebastián Gómez was another enslaved painter who at the time was thought to have been of African descent, like Juan de Pareja. Of course, Juan de Pareja, Negroes in Sevilla, Notes on Panama, and the Negro, My Trip to Cuba, José Campeche. The founder of visual arts in Puerto Rico, 18th century, the most renowned painter in 18th century Puerto Rico, and Archbishop Victoria, a Negro, the first native archbishop in the Americas. So why do I do this? Because this is the span of his writing, right? Like, he is writing about the Americas and Western Europe. The manner in which he was written about, to the point, right? Little to no mention of his birth and childhood in Puerto Rico. If it was mentioned, it was mentioned in passing, and there was a sense of betrayal on the part of certain writers who said, oh, he only focuses on them. What about us? Right? That them us is going to mess us up. More on that in a second. Here's the story, right? The story is that Arturo Schomburg, people ask, how could this person be so involved in history? What is this? And the story is that as a child in Puerto Rico, a teacher told him, los negros no tienen historia. Black people have no history, right? Now, this was not an uncommon thought at the time, right? Heigl very famously said, Africa has no history, right? The thought was he was in history clubs as a child. And when his classmates were rolling off like heroes, he said, wait, where are the heroes that look like me? And his teacher said, los negros no tienen historia. Everything that I said was fairly easy to find. Why wasn't his story more widely known? What we choose to focus on is what we value. Sometimes it's not malice, right, at all. Diasporic Blackness does not focus on his mother being from the USVI, from St. Croix. I've had people come up to me go, why didn't you include that? I included it, but that was not the focus of the book. Focus of the book was bringing him from a US Black context into, wait a minute, he has a diasporic sensibility, but he was born and raised in Puerto Rico, right? And in St. Croix. So could I have written that book to be a Caribbean book? Absolutely. Did I choose not to do so because at the time I was a professor of Spanish and Portuguese and I was writing about Afro-Latinidad? También. Sometimes it's not malice. Sometimes it's just focus. But it also means that there's opportunity for more. We are, each of us, already both archives and archivists. We curate our existences every day, most of us anyway, with our social media accounts, what we decide or choose to share or not, what we hold on to. We do this as walking archives anyway. What we choose, the stories we choose to tell each other about ourselves, our origin stories, our villain stories, who did what to who, all of that. It's all archives. And we are constantly choosing, so that makes us both archive and archivist every day. When it comes to the history of Black people, people of African descent, living and breathing in Spanish, how are you looking for them? There are a fair number of scholars in the room, independent scholars, grad students, professors. How are you looking for them? Those of you who aren't, how are you looking for them? What words are you using? Where are you looking? Why do I say this? Because we're in part 4 already. Aren't you excited? We're almost done, y'all. How do you counter larger narratives, larger histories? When I was in college, the way I learned about Puerto Ricans coming to New York was 1917, right? Bernardo Vega, Juan Colón, the Jones Act, World War I, that was the migration. Arturo Schomburg doesn't fit in that because Arturo Schomburg came in 1891. Which means, oh, we got to push the narrative back, right? And that's okay, right? Because if people get caught up in, oh, but the PhD wrote this, so who am I, right? I'll have something, Arturo Schomburg said something about that in a second. What is the role of nationalism in this work? Again, Puerto Rico. If Puerto Rico says there's no race, what are you talking about? Y tampoco tenemos negro, porque toditos somos puertorriqueños, but you have to counter that, right? You have to go against that. What words are you using? If you go black equals negro, and you go into the archive, and you are ignoring paldo, mulato, cuarterona, you are ignoring Black people without even thinking about it because you are using official language, right? So you have to undercut all of that, question all of it as you are doing the work. A comment about invisibility. I love this moment. So Toni Morrison is going to come up a couple of times. This is the first one. When Toni Morrison learned about Ralph Ellison's novel, Invisible Man, she said, invisible to who? Meaning, who's looking? Is your family looking? Does your family know you're there? Does your community know you're there? Then who are you invisible to? So, in overarching narratives of, oh, well, we're not here, who's writing it? And is it an opportunity for you to write against it? What can you do individually? Don't need PhDs. Don't need all the degrees. What can you do? What is your role? Here's some of what I do. Being a series editor at SUNY Press, what this means is I get to greenlight work. I also get to say this doesn't really fit. But these are the books that we have published to this point. With our first book starting in 2020 up until this year. So you have Haiti, the Dominican Republic, Puerto Rico, Drops of Inclusivity is about Puerto Rico, San Mateo de Cangrejos, Historical Notes, that's a translation, right? Black in Print is about Central America. Feminist Spiritualities is about the Cuba, Dominican Republic, and Puerto Rican women, writers, and artists. Belo Dian is about Haiti. Spirit of Haiti is a novel. Slave Resistance and the Cinematic Imaginary in Cuba, that's From Havana to Hollywood. Transatlantic Bondage is about Spain and Puerto Rico and Cuba and the Dominican Republic, because the Dominican Republic, when we talk about the early modern Caribbean, is often left out, and there's Machado de Assis. That's what I do. It's my role, right? Just an example. What does it mean to be a series editor? It means I get to greenlight. This is a translation series. Right? Workshop of Silence is a poetry collection from a Haitian author, Jean d'Amérique. Camille's Lacour is from Guadeloupe, right? More to come. These are our first books coming this July. Because I'm in position. That's what I can do. We all have a position, each one of us. So what can you do? What is your role? What writing about Black history can do is it will pull up all of your stuff. Meaning, if, para ustedes que hablan español, los que reclaman ahí que ustedes son, orgullosamente ustedes dicen que son afro-latinos, pero no pueden decir que you are Black. What is the difference? If the negritud gets stuck in the throat, you say, no, yo soy afro-latina, tú eres negra. Well, yo soy. What's going on? What's happening? Because it's now the question of translation. Understand that proximity to whiteness did not mean that people were white. If you were paldo, if you were mulata, it didn't matter. Proximity to whiteness did not mean that they were white. Understand that the regimes continue to understand this, right? So just knowing what that is. How are you talking about Black history? Where are you looking to learn more? It's a whole history in the United States of Black journals, of HBCUs. Are you looking there for your scholarship? For those of you who are looking, you're only looking at your organizations. Are you going to places where the archives are? Are you going to Spain? Are you going to Sao Tome and Príncipe? Are you going to Brazil? Because this was a transatlantic, this was a global enterprise. If you're doing slavery, you have, or the ramifications of it, you have to go all the places. Oh, but I can't find it. Where are you looking? How are you looking? What are the terms? What is the role of Black history right now in our lives? I do not need to tell anybody in this room or online what we are living through. But trust that Black people have seen it all, built it in spite of it all, in worse. Black public education in Puerto Rico is because of a Black family, the Cordero siblings. Black people have always taught each other. In New York, the Cubans and Puerto Ricans that came here, in preparation years ahead of the Spanish-American War, when they were dreaming of a free Cuba, dreaming of a free Puerto Rico, Rafael Serra established La Liga, because we have always taught each other. Now, if you think, oh, in the United States, right, this happens also, it happens everywhere. This is what Black people do. We always take care of each other. We always establish alternate houses. We always establish alternate families. In religious contexts, ballrooms, houses. See what the language of houses, the language of families. See it. It's all relational. We're always constantly building things. How do we interact as peoples of African descent right now? Meaning, again, what is the role of nationalism there? Oh, what's happening there has nothing to do with me. It's nothing to do with me. Really? Okay. That is not how our ancestors 100 years ago lived. It all has to do with us. How can our collective Black history mean our survival right now? Again, they've lived it already. They live worse. So we look to the models that we already have. Toni Morrison again. If there is a book you want to read, but it hasn't been written yet, then you must write it. I say this with all due respect to folks. So when you pick up a book or you pick up anything and you go, man, I wish it had this, or I wish it had, guess what? That's your book. That's calling out to you. It's not that author's book. The book you're holding is the book that they wanted to write. But your version, man, it could have had this spin on it. Any movie, any Broadway show, anything, man, but if it had this, that's yours. It's your vision. That's the idea tapping on you. Now, are you going to bring it to life? But don't put that on anybody else. I also say that with regards to, again, our fearless leaders here, they can do what they do. Do not put everything on them. What are you doing? What are you doing? Because more often than not, we come to our leaders, whoever we deem our leaders, and we say, oh, you're going to solve it. You're going to fix it. As opposed to taking things off their plate, because trust that their plates are full. How can you assist and support them? By doing your own thing, because it's different to come up and say, hey, I did this, rather than, can you do it? Different. 1913. We need a collection or list of books written by our men and women. If they lack style, let the children of tomorrow correct the omissions of their sires. Let them build upon the crude work, meaning for the perfectionists in the room. So what? It's not perfect. So what? Let them correct it. The most important thing is to get it out. Let them, because of the opportunities that colleges and universities grant, crystallize the crude work and bring it out flawless. It doesn't have to be perfect right now. The most important thing is that it's here. Give birth to it. Release it. Next. Always, always, always look for the presence beyond the absence. Keep looking. They're always there, I promise you. They're waiting for you. It's an invitation for you to answer. Thank you.